You know, um, navigating Congress is sort of like trying to order a la carte at a restaurant that, well, it only sells 10-course set menus.
Oh, yeah. That's a great way to put it.
Right. Like you sit down, you just want the appetizer, maybe just a simple salad. But the waiter tells you that you cannot get the salad unless you also agree to the steak, the seafood tower, and, I don't know, a highly specific dessert that you happen to be allergic to.
Exactly. You can't just say, I'll just take the salad.
Yeah. You either eat the whole thing or you leave hungry.
It's basically the ultimate exercise in forced compromise. And, I mean, we see it happen constantly. You take something universally popular, like banning members of Congress from trading stock.
Which everyone agrees on.
Right. And you just strap it to something fiercely debated, like a nationwide voter ID mandate. And suddenly this really simple idea becomes an all-or-nothing political trap.
Yeah, which is exactly what we're getting into today. So welcome to Congress in Context. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack the congressional record from Monday, July 27, 2026.
We are looking past the political rhetoric to really explore the mechanical realities of how legislation is maneuvered through the House and the Senate.
Right. And our guiding question today is a mystery that I think frustrates everyday Americans all the time. Like, why do seemingly straightforward, universally popular ideas just fail?
It all comes down to procedure. I mean, the rules of the Senate and the House, they are not just administrative guidelines, they are weapons. They dictate what passes, what stalls, and honestly, what becomes a talking point for the next election.
Absolutely. And real quick, before we jump into the details of Monday's record, I just want to share a quick housekeeping note with you all. This deep dive is a completely independent project.
Yes, it is.
So if you find this kind of breakdown valuable, and, you want to help support the production infrastructure that keeps this ad-free civic education resource running, you can just click the Buy Me a Coffee link right in your app's show notes.
We truly appreciate it. It really allows us to dig into these dense legislative texts so you don't have to. And that 10-course set menu analogy you opened with, that is exactly the dynamic we are seeing in the July 27th record. But to understand why popular bills fail, we first have to understand the two extreme speeds of the Senate.
Right, the agonizingly slow crawl and the instantaneous fast lane.
Spot on.
Okay, so let's unpack this by starting with the slow crawl. Looking at the executive calendar from Monday, the Senate was considering the nomination of Walter Clayton to be the Director of National Intelligence.
Yes.
And the record shows they held a cloture vote, which passed 51 to 43, with 6 senators not voting. Now, I know we've talked about cloture before, but seeing it play out in a 51 to 43 vote really highlights the friction in the system, right? Like, they basically had to hit the stopwatch on the debate.
That is exactly what a cloture vote is. It's a mandatory stopwatch.
Yeah.
Because, the Senate was originally designed as a place of unlimited debate.
Right.
The whole idea was to cool the passions of the House by ensuring every single minority voice could be heard for as long as they wanted to speak. We call that the filibuster.
But in the modern era, you rarely see a senator actually standing at a podium reading the phone book until they pass out. Right?
Yeah, not at all. The Mr. Smith goes to Washington-style filibuster is pretty much just a Hollywood memory at this point.
Yeah.
Today, the filibuster is more of an invisible hurdle. A senator just signals their intent to object, and everything just stops.
Wow.
So cloture is the tool they use to break that stalemate. When the Senate invokes cloture, it places a hard time limit on the remaining debate, forcing a final vote.
Got it. So in the case of Walter Clayton, the 51 to 43 vote successfully invoked cloture.
Exactly. That means the debate phase is legally required to wrap up, setting the stage for his actual confirmation vote.
So even for an executive nomination, they have to burn days of floor time just jumping through procedural hoops to force the vote.
Yes, days of it.
But then, on the exact same day, we see the Senate operating in the fast lane. The record shows they passed Senate Resolution 781. This is a resolution commemorating June 19, 1865 as Juneteenth National Independence Day.
And this resolution actually highlights a really important piece of history, noting that while the Emancipation Proclamation was issued earlier, the news of the end of slavery didn't actually reach frontier areas until Union soldiers arrived in Galveston, Texas on June 19th.
Right, it's an incredibly important recognition. And looking at the record, it was discharged from the Judiciary Committee and agreed to on the floor by unanimous consent.
Yeah.
Nobody hit a stopwatch. There was no roll call vote.
Because unanimous consent is the ultimate efficiency tool, it means exactly what it sounds like. If a senator brings a measure to the floor and asks for unanimous consent, the presiding officer basically asks if there are any objections.
And if there aren't any,
If the room is silent, if not a single one of the 100 senators objects, the measure just bypasses the entire debate process and passes instantly.
So if everybody agrees, you don't need the stopwatch. You just wave it right through, which totally makes sense for things like historical commemorations.
Yeah.
But the Senate also uses some pretty bizarre efficiency hacks for complex legislation, which brings us to the pending business on the floor.
Oh, the vehicles.
Yes. And here's where it gets really interesting to me. I was looking through the record at H.R. 5334, also known as the SEED Act.
The Supporting Early Childhood Educators Deductions Act.
Right. According to the original text, this bill was drafted to amend the Internal Revenue Code to allow early childhood educators to take educator expense deductions.
Which is a nice, straightforward tax break for preschool teachers.
Yeah, exactly. But then the congressional record from July 27th indicates this same bill is now being utilized as a vehicle for international sanctions legislation.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I stared at that page for a while. I mean, how on earth does a preschool teacher tax deduction transform into a foreign policy sanctions package?
I know, it sounds absurd until you understand the constitutional constraints the Senate is working under. You see, the U.S. Constitution requires that all bills for raising revenue, so taxes, tariffs, that sort of thing, must originate in the House of Representatives.
Going back to the founders' belief that the chamber closest to the people should control the purse strings.
Precisely. No taxation without representation. But the Senate frequently wants to pass its own revenue or financial measures without having to wait for the House to draft something from scratch.
Right. They want to move fast.
So to bypass the lengthy process of starting a brand new bill, Senate leadership will take a bill that has already successfully passed the House and arrived on their desk. In this case, the SEED Act.
Okay.
They take that bill and they strip out every single word of its original text.
Wait, literally all of it?
Every single word. They leave nothing but the tracking number and the title. Then they insert completely unrelated policy-like international sanctions into that empty shell. And they do this through a process called an amendment in the nature of a substitute.
Okay, so they basically keep the chassis of the car because it's already registered and, street legal.
Right.
But they completely swap out the engine, the interior, and the paint job.
That is a fantastic way to visualize it. The bill retains its original tracking number, H.R. 5334, and because that tracking number has already cleared certain constitutional and procedural hurdles in the House, it streamlines the pathway in the Senate.
Even though the content is fundamentally different.
Exactly. The preschool tax deductions are just gone, replaced entirely by sanctions.
Man, it is wild that the system requires that kind of workaround just to function.
It really is.
And speaking of workarounds, we see another one in Senate Resolution 817, which the Senate is currently considering. This resolution authorizes the unblock consideration of 61 different executive nominations.
Yeah, so en bloc simply means altogether or simultaneously. The sheer volume of modern governance makes this necessary. If the Senate had to hold 61 separate debates and 61 separate cloture votes for every single ambassador, lower court judge, and agency official, it would literally consume months of floor time.
It wouldn't be able to do anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this procedural measure allows them to confirm all 61 individuals in a single vote.
Okay, so we have these highly efficient tools. Unanimous consent for things everyone agrees on, legislative vehicles to bypass constitutional red tape, and en bloc voting to clear the backlog.
Yes.
But to truly understand these highlights, we have to look at what happens when these tools are weaponized. Like when these exact same procedures are used strategically to force a standoff, the machinery just grinds to a halt.
Oh, absolutely.
And that brings us to the main event from Monday, the floor debate over H.R. 7008.
This was a fascinating, multi-layered parliamentary maneuver between Senators Husted, Padilla, and Moreno. Let's look at the setup here.
Okay.
Senator Husted went to the floor and requested unanimous consent to pass H.R. 7008, which is titled the Stop Insider Trading Act.
And earlier, we established that unanimous consent is the fast lane for non-controversial things. But Husted's request contained a massive catch.
Right, a huge catch.
Yeah, because H.R. 7008 is a bundled bill. It contains two entirely distinct provisions that really have nothing to do with each other. First, a ban on stock trading by members of Congress, their spouses, and dependent children.
Right.
And second, it contains the Save America Act, which requires individuals to provide photo identification in order to vote in federal elections.
Exactly. Now, during his floor speech, Senator Husted cited public polling to support this bundle. He noted that 83% of Americans support voter ID laws and 88% support banning members of Congress from trading stocks.
Though very high numbers.
Very high. He argued that these are broadly supported common sense issues that transcend party lines. So by asking for unanimous consent, he was attempting to pass both measures instantly, essentially daring anyone in the chamber to object.
But remember, unanimous consent requires absolute silence. 0 objections. And Senator Padilla used his parliamentary right to stand up and object.
He did.
But he didn't just say no and sit back down. Right. He made a counteroffer right there on the floor.
Yeah, he used a specific procedural tool called modifying the request. Senator Padilla objected to the inclusion of the Save America Act, the voter ID provisions.
Okay.
And he asked to modify Senator Husted's request so that the Senate would instead pass Senate Bill 1498 by unanimous consent. That bill is known as the Pelosi Act, and its text consists solely of the congressional stock trading ban, completely stripping away the voting identification requirements.
So Padilla's basically saying, let's unbundle this. I will give you the unanimous consent you want for the stock trading ban. We can pass it right now, today, but we drop the voter ID mandate.
Exactly.
But then a third player enters the mix. Senator Moreno steps in and uses his right to object to Padilla's modification.
Right.
Moreno pointed out that H.R. 708 had already passed the House with bipartisan support. He argued that by objecting to the bundled version, Padilla was effectively blocking a ban on insider trading that could have been signed into law the very next day.
And by objecting to the modification, Senator Moreno ensured that the original bundled request failed, and Padilla's unbundled request also failed.
So nobody gets anything.
The result was a complete stalemate. The entire effort collapsed, and neither measure advanced.
Man. Okay, to give you a broader view of why this standoff happened, let's look at the cross-chamber perspectives on this exact dispute. Because over in the House, Representative McCollum had previously stated her fierce opposition to H.R. 7008.
Yes, she did.
But it is important to note that she didn't frame her opposition around the stock trading ban at all. She focused entirely on the specific impacts of the Save America Act portion of the bundle.
Right. Based on the congressional record, Representative McCollum argued that the voter identification provisions would directly override existing state laws. She pointed out that several states currently permit the use of, student IDs or hunting licenses for voting purposes, which this federal law would basically invalidate.
And she also noted it would heavily restrict voting by mail, right?
Exactly. Her core argument was that implementing these sweeping changes just 90 days before a federal election would severely disrupt election administration at the state and local levels.
And Senate Majority Leader Schumer backed up that sentiment, delivering a speech noting that because of these stark disagreements over election administration, the SADE Act provisions were, in his words, dead on arrival in the Senate chamber.
So when we synthesize this dispute impartially, we see two colliding priorities here.
Okay, lay it out for us.
On one side, you have lawmakers prioritizing uniform federal election security standards and the immediate passage of ethics reform through a bundled House bill.
Right.
And on the other side, you have lawmakers prioritizing state-level voting accessibility and resisting immediate changes to election timelines just before voters head to the polls.
So both sides are using the exact same procedural tool, the unanimous consent objection, to block the other's preferred legislative path.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean? When you zoom out and look at this standoff, it raises a really obvious question for you, the listener. If a senator knows that an objection is 100% imminent, if Senator Husted knows for an absolute fact that Senator Padilla or someone else is going to stand up and block the voter ID provision, why does he even bother asking for unanimous consent in the first place? Why go through the theater of it all?
Because unanimous consent serves a dual purpose in the modern Senate.
Okay.
Yes, it is designed to bypass the cloture process for genuinely non-controversial items like the Juneteenth resolution we talked about, but it has evolved into a highly calculated messaging tool.
A messaging tool, meaning the goal isn't actually to pass a law at all. It's about forcing a public confrontation.
Precisely. By going to the floor and asking for unanimous consent on a bundled package that you know will fail, you force your opponent to stand up and publicly vocalize their objection.
Creating a permanent record.
Yes, a permanent on-the-record event. It generates a video clip. It allows the proposing senator to go to the media or their constituents and say, I tried to pass this incredibly popular measure to ban stock trading, and my colleague blocked it.
Oh, I see. It completely strips the context of the bundle away for the sake of the soundbite.
Exactly. Which brings us back to the logic of legislative bundling itself. You take a measure with extremely high consensus like banning lawmakers from trading stocks with non-public information, and you attach a highly debated measure to it, like the voter ID mandate.
Right. And by doing so, you force your legislative opponents into a binary take-it-or-leave-it scenario.
You force them to either swallow a policy they fundamentally oppose or go on the record blocking a policy that their own constituents overwhelmingly support.
It really is exactly like the old cable TV model.
Oh, totally.
It's like a cable company forcing you to buy a 500-channel bundle filled with infomercials and obscure programming you don't want,
Yeah.
just so you can get the one local news channel you actually need.
Yeah.
You can't just buy the news channel. You have to buy the bundle, or you get nothing at all. And the cable company knows you'll probably just walk away in frustration.
It's the exact same dynamic. And, this raises an important point about the historical perspective of the Senate. Well, these mechanisms we've discussed today, vehicle bills, bundled legislation, strategic unanimous consent requests, these are not anomalies. They're not glitches in the matrix.
Right.
They are standard intentional features of the modern legislative process. They are specifically designed to maximize leverage.
Because in a closely divided government, getting anything done is just hard.
Exactly. Where passing legislation through regular order with 60 votes for cloture is exceedingly difficult, bundling becomes the primary strategy for forcing compromises or, honestly, more often, defining political platforms for the next election.
So we are looking at a system where the rules themselves are used as leverage to create gridlock on purpose.
Pretty much.
So how did this impact the actual timeline of upcoming governance? Like, what happens next?
Well, looking at the pending votes in the record, the immediate next steps are already scheduled. The final confirmation vote for Walter Clayton as Director of National Intelligence is scheduled for Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. And following the disposition of that nomination, the Senate will immediately pivot to a cloture vote on H.R. 5334.
That's the SEED Act, the vehicle bill that was stripped of the preschool tax deductions and loaded up with the foreign sanctions package.
Correct. The Senate will vote on whether to invoke cloture to hit the stopwatch on any potential filibuster, basically, so they can move to a final vote on that sanctions vehicle.
Got it. And while all this high-stakes maneuvering is happening on the Senate floor, the legislative engine keeps running behind the scenes in the committee rooms.
Yes, the committees are busy.
The record lists some significant upcoming committee work that gives us a preview of what might be coming down the pipeline next. For instance, the Homeland Security Committee is scheduled to hear testimony from Anthony Fauci.
Right. And additionally, the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, commonly known as the HELP Committee, will hold a subcommittee hearing examining the impact of artificial intelligence on the workplace.
It's really easy to overlook committee hearings when the floor fights are so dramatic, but the committees are where the real substance of these bills is supposedly hammered out before they get bundled into political weapons.
Exactly. Committee hearings represent the genesis of legislation. Before a bill ever becomes a vehicle or gets bundled into a unanimous consent request, it is researched, debated, and drafted in these committees.
But things change as we get closer to an election, right?
Oh, absolutely. As we forecast broader trends, especially as an election approaches, you should expect to see the balance shift away from substantive committee work and toward the kind of floor drama we saw with the stock trading bill.
So more messaging.
Yes. You will see an increase in bundled legislation and strategic unanimous consent requests. These maneuvers will be increasingly designed to define policy platforms for the voters rather than to pass immediate consensus-driven law.
Because the closer you get to an election, the more valuable that on-the-record objection becomes as a campaign messaging tool. The goal isn't really to govern, it's to get the other side on camera saying no.
The rules of the institution are utilized to serve the electoral calendar. It is a very predictable cycle.
Well, we've covered a vast amount of ground today, from the stopwatch of cloture to the hollowed-out vehicles of the SEED Act, all the way to the weaponized bundling of the stock trading ban.
It's been a busy week in the record.
It really has. We want to thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the inner workings of the legislative branch. We genuinely appreciate you spending your time with us. And as a reminder, if you want to help keep this ad-free civic education resource sustainable, you can click the Buy Me a Coffee link right in the show description. Your support is what makes this possible.
And if you want to explore these processes yourself, there are actionable steps you can take. We highly encourage you to visit congress.gov.
It's a great tool.
It is a fantastic resource. You can look up the exact text of H.R. 7008 S1498 and HR 5334. You can actually read the bundled provisions, see how an amendment in the nature of a substitute actually looks on the page, and verify all the procedural histories we discussed today.
And if you have perspectives on these maneuvers or on specific bills like the stock trading ban or the sanctions vehicle, you can contact your local representatives to share your views. Let them know you understand the games being played with unanimous consent.
Absolutely. Tracking upcoming events like the HELP committee hearing on AI in the workplace is a phenomenal way to participate in democracy beyond just voting on election day.
Getting involved early.
Exactly. Staying informed at the committee level allows you to understand a policy's true intent long before it ever reaches the floor and gets tangled up in a cloture vote or a partisan bundle.
It's all about looking past the rhetoric and understanding the machinery. Which brings us back to our restaurant with the 10-course set menu.
Oh, right.
We leave you with a final question to mull over. If transparency measures like congressional stock trading bans are universally popular with the American public, but practically impossible to pass without attaching partisan riders, does the modern legislative architecture fundamentally incentivize gridlock over consensus?
It's a tough question.
It really is. Are the rules themselves the reason we can't have nice things? It is definitely something to think about the next time you hear a headline claiming that a bill has failed in Congress. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you on the next Deep Dive.